invited me to talk about equity, given that we are celebrating Equity Week, I went to the dictionary to find out exactly what equity is defined as. And this is what I found in the dictionary. It says that it means the quality of being fair or just or impartial. But what does being just or fair or impartial mean? And one Leek Riordan said that fairness does not mean everyone gets the same. Fairness means that everyone gets what they need, according to Rick. But we know that from a resource sharing perspective, resources are scarce. So it is not possible to ensure that everyone gets what they need. So as the Commission mandated to ensure there is equitable sharing of revenues, what have we done, or what are we doing to tackle inequality, marginalization, and poverty? The Commission has a vision that no Kenyan will be left behind. And the Commission, to breathe life to that policy, actually, or that vision, has two policy levers. And the first lever is the marginalization policy. This is the policy where the Commission sets out who is marginalized and then comes up with a criteria for allocating the equalization fund. And the second lever, or the second instrument that the Commission uses, is the formula that is used to share revenues among the 47 county governments. Let me start with the equalization or marginalization policy. Again, this is the policy where the Commission determines, one, who is marginalized, and then number two, comes up with a criteria of allocating the equalization fund. How have we then set out to define that policy? Before formulating the second policy, which is now under implementation, the Commission first went out to establish the form and phase that marginalization takes in Kenya. It was a one-year journey that took us to all the 47 county governments. We wanted to understand the status of health facilities, the status of schools, roads, water, and electricity. And this is what we found. In the area of health, we found that as the country strives to achieve universal health care, there are some places in Kenya today where mothers deliver in the bush and recuperate in temporary shelters before they head back home, where there is limited postnatal care. These are the areas that contribute disproportionately to the 10 women who die every day due to birth-related complications. To these women, or mothers, an NHIF card on its own will be of limited utility unless they can get to a health facility in time to get medical attention. In our exploratory sojourn, we visited areas where a modicum of health facilities do exist, but staffing remains a daunting challenge because of insecurity. In the area of agriculture, which is very closely related or speaks to the issue of roads, we visited areas with very fertile agricultural land, with great potential, and a hard-working population to boot. These are areas that have great potential to supply our markets with food, which we often import. But because of poor infrastructure and lack of access to market, these farmers continue to wallow in abject poverty as we import food they can produce, not just for the local market, but even potentially for export. These areas rely largely on boda to take their produce to markets. That was the status of roads that we found as we went around these places. In the case of water, we came across mothers and children who spent inordinate lengths of time fetching water, and often that water is not clean enough for human consumption. In one location, one of the readers told us a story of how, as a young boy, his mother had gone out to fetch water about 10 kilometers away. And when she got home, the jerrycan fell and the water spilled out. The mother sat down and cried. For the first time, this young boy, who is now a registrator in our parliament, watched his mother cry. And that determined or defined his quest to become a registrator. While not every one of us have watched their parents cry, in all the areas that we visited, water was identified as one of the priorities for investment using the Equalization Fund. As we traveled through the counties, we did go to the areas where nomadic pastoralism is the lifestyle. And in these areas, this lifestyle and insecurity remain a big challenge in provision of basic services. We came across areas where children start school at age 13 and drop out by age 17 when they are ready for marriage. And in areas where transition to secondary schools is rare, and where it happens, the walk to school several kilometers away can be daunting. We found schools that can barely muster enough pupils to qualify as examination centers. We came across area where children wake up at 3 a.m. in Kajiado to get to school by 9 o'clock, and they had again to start the journey back home by 3 o'clock because of insecurity. Again, in our exploratory sojourn, we visited areas where a modicum of schools and health facilities do exist, but staffing remains because of insecurity. This, again, you saw in the video. So after 1 year, after the journey that took about 1 year, we were able to identify these places and we know them by name. So in formulating the second policy, the second marginalization policy, we invoke and reiterate the cardinal principle of equity and adopt a new approach in identifying marginalized areas and not counties, as was the case in the first policy. The new approach, moves beyond identifying marginalized counties and instead uses sub-locations as a basic area of analysis. This approach affords the Commission the capacity and necessary insights required to ply into each county more deeply. In so doing, it brings out instances of marginalization that exist even among those counties perceived as well endowed. The rationale underlying this approach is that resources meant to improve services in lagging areas have to be properly targeted for maximum impact. This second policy therefore identifies 1,424 sub-locations out of 7,131, where about 5 million Kenyans live. The second policy is designed to reach these Kenyans and uplift their lives by enhancing access to basic services, notably health, education, water, roads, and electricity. Colleagues, today we wanted to zoom in a little bit on urban poverty. And when we did the policy, the urban areas, we observed that the challenges in urban slums are very unique and cannot be tackled through the Equalization Fund. So you'll observe that in the second policy, we do not have any urban areas or the urban slums. So, but we know that the Equalization Fund alone, at 0.5% of revenue, is not enough to tackle the challenges in urban areas. So allow me to talk about the second lever or the second policy lever that the Commission has. That is the formula that is used to share revenues among county governments, or what we call the Equitable Share Allocation formula. Those who are familiar with this formula, that is used to share revenue among county governments will know that it has 6 indicators, or indices, or parameters, if you like. That formula has poverty, it has land area, it has a development index, it has what we call a fiscal responsibility parameter, and a basic equal share. Each of these indicators carry a different weight in the formula. Allocations based on poverty, land area, and development are designed to address inequality and development gaps. These parameters also measure the needs of counties and address differences in the levels of development of county governments. Specifically, the poverty parameter is used as a proxy or a determinant of development needs and economic disparity, with the goal of achieving redistribution and address inequalities in counties. In the poverty parameter, the Commission uses the poverty gap measure, which quantifies the extent to which individuals and households fall below the poverty line. And determines how then revenue will be shared in those jurisdictions. You note that the revenue shared through the poverty parameter is much, much higher than the fund that we share through the equalization fund. Friends, since the onset of devolution, 1.5 trillion shillings has been allocated to county governments from 2013-14 to 2018-19 as equitable share. Of this 1.5 trillion shillings, 302 billion, and you can see that on the slide, has been shared on the account of poverty. That is the depth of poverty in each county. Land area has been used to share 126 billion, while the development index has been used to share 6 billion. Putting all this together, it means that Kenya's shillings 434 billion has been allocated to tackle poverty and close development gaps among counties. These are the funds that cover or should deal with urban poverty issues. And our team will show you, our technical team will take you through how each of the urban areas around the metropolitan has been allocated funds using these 3 indicators: poverty, land area, and the development gap. If these resources are used well, the country should see a significant reduction in poverty and inequality. The challenge, therefore, is for every citizen to hold their leaders accountable. Thank you very much.